consideration. There are pros and cons of each investment vehicles. There's different tax implications. So choosing the right investment vehicles really depends on what you're trying to achieve. So in light of all this, today we're going to put the spotlight on education bonds. And we have Amy Parsons joining us from Futurity to share more. So Amy, over to you. Tell us more about education bonds. What are the main features and benefits?
Absolutely. So as you've clearly articulated, usually it's to do with a purpose, and a lot of it comes down to the education component. So we all know superannuation is obviously for retirement and planning, but it also, what we've learned is that it goes into different avenues like wealth transfer. Similarly with the education bond, it is to cover education costs, and those costs aren't just fees, they're ancillaries as well. So when education bonds come up into conversation, it's more around that they've got children or they're expecting children or their family's going to grow, or it might be grandparents who are expecting grandchildren or they already have grandchildren and want to play a part in their world, and education comes into play straight away. We are a vehicle that obviously you can invest into the market with, and if you are on 30% or higher, it is clearly a standout because within the bond it is taxed internally up to 30%. So if you're higher than that, obviously there is a savings straight away that you can identify. And then once the bond is in play, we receive the offsets as well. So it actually, in fact, might be lower than 30% depending on the investment options that are selected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So people might have heard the term investment bonds.
Yes.
How is that different to an education bond?
Okay, so the investment bond rules, which consist of pre-10 years and post-10 years, so a lot of people may just think of investment bonds putting it into the market and then being able to take it out from the post-10 years, so the 11th year, but being able to take it out without triggering a tax event. That's actually built into the education bond as a withdrawal option, but we do have an additional 2 other options to be able to withdraw. So the one that relates to education is the education benefit claim, which is under the scholarship plan. And when you take out money from earnings under the education benefit claim, it's actually accessible in the hands of the beneficiary. So I'm a firm believer that this is an advice product, and the reason why is because with a minor, so under 18 being an education beneficiary, there are some limitations around there, which is where an advisor comes into play to make sure that the right decision is made. But you're getting a 30% gross up instantly within the bond if it's used for education.
Yeah.
And the education, as I said, the ancillaries could be technology, it could be iPads, they break every year.
Yeah.
It could be
textbooks,
it could be musical instruments, uniforms, overseas exchange. The other thing I will highlight is that it actually is an international product as well. So if you have a child who wants to play college basketball in the States, then that's okay. Or if there's, you're overseas but planning to come back to Australia or vice versa, it's the bond can still be utilised as well. I will touch on the third withdrawal option, which is the capital only withdrawal. So unlike other investment options that are available to your clients, you can take out capital only withdrawals for any purpose. So any life event from day one that occurs and you need the capital, so any contributions that have been added to the bond can be taken out for any purpose without triggering a tax event. So that's a really big point of difference as well.
Yeah. And so what are some of the misconceptions that you often hear about education?
I think that maybe it's a lot of past or even some of the material that I see that's written online.
Yeah.
And it's not even advisors who are writing it, it's just more a perception or their own thought process on it is incorrect. So thank you for asking that question. And I think probably the most I get told is it's too rigid and too restrictive.
Yeah.
Whereas I actually think it's completely the opposite. You have the opportunity to be able to flex and mold with your life journey. And we all know that life brings different events. Yeah. And being able to adapt, especially in this day and age, we're having a lot of worldwide events that are occurring where you do have to adapt really quickly. The bond is very similar. The bond allows you to change the structure throughout the journey without having any tax implications as well. And obviously that's down to the conversations that you hold with your clients.
I think some of the misconceptions might have come from historical, way that the bond might have been built, or the limited investment options, but
Yes.
nowadays that's completely different.
Absolutely. So we've got 32 options available on our bond, and that will grow. The other thing is that you can change within the bond. So you can actually, if you're in an option at the moment and something else better comes along, or that you believe that it would be a better option, you can change it within the bond without triggering CGT as well.
Yeah. Can you give me an example, a real life example of who an education bond would be really optimal for?
Absolutely. So I think it's intergenerational, to be honest, and a lot of the bonds that we see come through are, it could even be an individual who's dreaming of being married, and perhaps they're still studying themselves as the bond owner and also the education beneficiary. But quite often it's going to be a couple that comes in, they've either just got married and anticipating a family, or perhaps they've got a family and that they will grow. We see a lot of combinations of contributions going into the bond. So whether that be from the parents and grandparents, it could be from multiple into the bond who are paying for it, or individuals. So a lot of grandparents may actually want to open bonds themselves and only have them as the owners, so that the children actually know it's come from them as well.
And that might be good to start that conversation with your parents if they're starting to talk about, an early inheritance, or they also want to contribute to your kids' education in the future. That's probably a good option.
Absolutely. And the reality is whoever the bond owner is still has full control of the bond. So they're able to access that capital if they needed it. So quite often if it's grandparents, they may want to do medical trials or even use the money for something else. But in all honesty, the majority of their money's in an estate, and this is actually a non-estate asset, so it can't be contested either. So a lot of families love having it in place, almost like a pseudo trust. We're not called a trust, we're an education bond, but it acts the same way as a discretionary trust would.
Yeah, and just to explain that a little further, when you say it's a non-estate asset, when someone passes away, it doesn't fall within, not covered under their will, so it's something that's separate.
Correct.
That has a level of
protection.
Yeah.
I often hear the wording keeping it in the bloodlines, particularly around marriage breakdowns as well. So quite a lot of grandparents may be concerned about who their adult child is partnered with, and if they're no longer here, what happens if their marriage breaks up. So the bond is structured through advice to make sure that it stays within their bloodlines and is looked after by the adult child as the guardian of the bond.
So it's called an education bond. So what happens if the funds that are invested in the structure are ultimately not used for education purposes?
You miss out on a bit. So you miss out on getting the 30% gross up if it's not used for education, but you've also got access to those two other options. So capital only can be taken out without triggering a tax event, but then also you've got the investment bond rules. So post 10 years, you could take the funds out, which is a combination of earnings and capital, which you could remove all of it. You could take the entire amount out of the bond without triggering an additional tax or triggering any tax.
That does lead to it, like another misconception that people think that bond is locked away.
Yes.
So it sounds like there's still different options. It's just about the tax benefits.
Yes.
At what point you can actually get those benefits.
Absolutely, and that's where the advice comes in. That's so important year on year, or when there is an expense that needs to be paid, is being able to identify and not trigger a tax event when you are taking the money out. So absolutely, you can take out money without triggering any tax, but you do need the guidance to make sure that it doesn't get triggered.
So Amy, I know you've been with Futurity for over 5 years now. What are some reasons why people who are building their household wealth like education bonds?
Yeah, I think probably the main contributor would be keeping them on track for their education costs for children. So whether or not they know where they're going to, whether it's private or independent or even state school, it's just having a plan in place and keeping them on track would be probably number one. Second to that, it would be the predictability around tax as well. So being able to plan as well and know where where they're going, I guess, from their tax rate. Some may start on a lower tax rate, but over time they're increasing. So we see a lot of Medico where they're obviously not
their residents.
Absolutely, and then their pay will absolutely
increase.
So
and they actually know when it will increase as well.
Correct.
A certain period of time.
Yes. So I would say that's it. I would also say that they don't have to do the reporting. So Futurity does the reporting for our members. So that is one less thing that they have to be able to even consider. I would also say it keeps them being consistent with their investing habits as well. So it keeps them, creating wealth as they grow as well. And there's simplicity around discretionary trusts as well. So it is another option to be considered. Yes, we're called an education bond, but also it would act like a family trust or a discretionary trust.
Yeah, and I think our clients seem to like the idea of being really intentional with your different buckets. You have different buckets for different purposes, and just having that separate structure can help with the psychological discipline of saving for a goal.
Absolutely, and I think if we're talking about mindset, and this is definitely, none of this is advice from my end, but my personal thought process is, if I can have access to funds without triggering any additional tax, then it gives me more opportunity and choice in the future as well. Yeah. So if you can access funds without triggering any additional tax or any tax, then you've got more flexibility in the future as well.
So Amy,